With the release of Lost Caverns of Ixalan, we have 4 new Commander Precons coming, each focused on a specific creature type. And today, we're looking at Explorers of the Deep, the green-blue Merfolk typal deck. Will this deck sink or swim? Have we landed a big one or just chummed the waters? Let's take a look at the deck's box legend, Hackball of the Surging Soul. This 4-mana 3/3 Merfolk Scout reads, at the beginning of combat on your turn, each Merfolk creature you control explores. Whenever Hackball of the Surging Soul attacks, you may put a land card from your hand onto the battlefield. If you don't, draw a card. To explore, you reveal the top card of your library. Put that card to your hand if it's a land. Otherwise, put a +1/+1 counter on the exploring creature, then you can put that card back on top or put it into your graveyard. This is an interesting commander because while he wants you to be Merfolk typal, so you have lots of exploring going on, you're perfectly fine with him being your only Merfolk as well. That attack trigger only works for him, and he makes himself explore. So regardless of how wide you've gone with Merfolk, you get all the value you need here. But of course, the wider you go with Merfolk, the more exploring you can do, which can lead to lots of counters or filtering all of the land off of the top of your library. Both of those options are good, and I think Hackball is a very solid overall commander. But he's not the only new legend in the deck. We also have Xolatoyac, the Smiling Flood. This adorable axolotl leviathan is a 6-mana 6/6 salamander serpent that says, when Xolatoyac the Smiling Flood enters the battlefield or attacks, put a flood counter on target land. That land is an island in addition to its other types for as long as it has a flood counter on it, whether you control Xolatoyac anymore or not. And at the beginning of your end step, untap each permanent you control with a counter on it. I like all of this, from being able to enable island walking strategies to fixing your own mana, but that second ability, untapping each permanent you control with a counter on it at the end of your end step, is very, very strong. It's a mini Seedborn Muse that allows you to use all of your mana on your turn and still hold up instant speed tricks, or have mana to pump into abilities, or even just tap out an attack and be ready to block everything as well. Plus, look at that goofy little face. This dork just wants to have fun. So fun that I'll be pivoting the deck to be more counter-focused, so we can effectively use all of our resources every turn, and, thanks to Xolatoyac, be ready for anything that comes our way. But first, let's take a look at some of the amazing new cards in this deck, why they're a great fit for our brew, or what other decks they may be perfect for. Starting with Wave Goodbye. This amazingly named board wipe is a 4-mana sorcery that simply says, return each creature without a +1/+1 counter on it to its owner's hand. Simple but effective. In any +1/+1 counter deck containing blue, this card is a must-have. It's a one-sided board wipe that leaves you free and clear to swing all out for the win, and set your opponents back significantly. Sure, there may be some instances where opponents get to keep a few creatures on the board incidentally, but you can shape and sculpt this to where you are achieving the biggest benefit, making sure creatures you want back in your hand to reuse their enters the battlefield effects, and keep attackers in play is exactly what this is meant for. Blue has only a few sculptable board wipes on their own, between this and cards like Whelming Wave, so it's a fantastic piece to make sure Cyclonic Rift isn't the only go-to for every deck, especially those looking to build on a budget. Next we have Deeproot Historian, a 4-mana 3/3 Merfolk Druid. It gives Merfolk and Druid cards in your graveyard retrace, meaning you can recast them by discarding a land card and paying any other costs. This is simple but effective, and works not only in Merfolk typal strategies, but incidentally to recast cards like Coiling Oracle or Elvish Mystic from your yard. When this was revealed, a lot of people thought that someone inside Wizards must have a Seton Corrosion Protector deck that needs some love, but I think this is just plain solid for a lot of strategies. Being able to recast your creatures from the graveyard is great utility in green, a color that doesn't often get direct reanimation effects all on its own, despite being a creature-heavy color. In the deck is also the new Ripples of Potential, a 2-mana blue instant that says, Proliferate. And to proliferate, choose any number of permanents or players with counters on them, and give them another of each of those counters, good counters or bad counters. Then, you can choose any number of permanents that had counters put on them this way and phase them out. Phased out permanents just don't exist, and also aren't in exile, and return at the beginning of your upkeep without triggering enters the battlefield effects. This is Blue's Gotcha spell. We normally see effects like this in white, allowing your creatures and permanents to dodge removal like with a Teferi's Protection, and green gets gotchas like Heroic Intervention, but now blue gets this effect as long as you have counters on your stuff. I think this is going to be a good in-color way to make sure you can protect your permanents, and I'd expect it to see a lot of play in Super Friends decks, where you can protect all of your planeswalkers while upping their loyalty, and of course in any deck that has a strong +1/+1 counter theme, it's an all-star. And much like Teferi's Protection, I would expect it to be in demand and pricey until it's reprinted. Then we have Singer of Swift Rivers. This guy's a 3-mana 3/2 Merfolk Shaman with Flash. On enters the battlefield, you put a shield counter on another target creature you control. When that creature is dealt damage or would be destroyed, you remove the shield counter instead. And importantly, you may cast Merfolk spells as though they had Flash. Talk about a gotcha spell! This is a lot like Swift Warden or Guardian Augmenter, but for any creature you control, stopping targeted removal or a bad block or even a board wipe. That's pretty basic, but also enabling you to cast your Merfolk with Flash is incredibly strong. We normally see this Flash enabling ability on cards like Leyline of Anticipation or Vidalcan Orrery for 4 mana and affecting all of your spells. So in a Merfolk typal list, this does work at 1 mana less. It won't be at home in every list, but in a brew where you have a lot of Merfolk or your commander is a Merfolk, you'll want this. Some may want it just for the Flash protection ability. With that said, let's look at some of the cards in the deck that get the cut. And since we're pivoting the deck to get counters on our permanents so Xolatoyac can untap them, we'll be seeing if there's anything that doesn't have or generate counters we can remove. Starting with Coral Helm Commander, Merfolk Mistbinder, and Thieving Skydiver. Don't get me wrong, if we were all about being Merfolk typal and only about being Merfolk typal, these are perfectly fine cards for the deck. But they don't give counters, they don't get counters, and they don't fit this new theme. We can also remove Realm Walker, Miro Reejerey, and Merfolk Sovereign too. I know, it's blasphemous to remove some of the best Merfolk lords from the deck, but remember, we care about counters pumping our creatures, not Anthem. And while these are good, they don't make or care about counters. And while I love her in landfall decks, Tatyova Benefic Druid just doesn't need to be in this list. We aren't ramping out of control here, and she's one of the higher cost cards in the deck. I'd rather have Kindred Discovery at 5 mana than Tatyova. It is already in this deck. Same goes for Tishana Voice of Thunder. I like her a lot in Elf Ball style Merfolk decks, but that's where she's more reliable to find in the command zone. I just don't want to be drawing a 7 mana card that needs me to have a full board full of creatures to actually be of any use. Some of our spells like Commit to Memory or Ravenform could be upgraded here too. Let's see what we can replace them with. And let's start by adding a few creatures that care about counters. First, with one of the GOATs, it's Fathom Mage. Despite not being a Merfolk, the Fathom Mage is one of the greatest sources of card draw in any blue-green deck that makes counters. With Evolve, it gets counters itself when a creature with greater power or toughness enters the battlefield under your control. But whenever you put a counter on it, no matter how, you draw a card. So 3 counters get put on it at once, 3 cards. Bam! This one is an engine in any deck that cares about counters. And a new addition to this archetype is Kami of Whispered Hope. Also not a Merfolk, this spirit is a Hardened Scales stapled to a body, and Hardened Scales is already in the deck. This means you get an extra counter on anything you put a counter on, itself included. Even better, if you manage to get its power even higher and higher, it taps to make that much mana of any one color. Mana Dork, counter increases, all on one card. It's an auto include. I'd also like to make sure Rishkar Pima Renegade makes it into the deck. This green legend is an elf, but when it enters, you get to put 2 counters on other creatures, himself included. To add to that, creatures with +1/+1 counters you control now tap 4 mana. Combined with your commander, this means everything is a mana dork and gets untapped at the end of your turn too. That's more mana than you need in a lot of cases, and all available for your use. Out of the box, this deck doesn't have any Planeswalkers, but Nissa Voice of Zendikar is too good to not have here. Coming down and immediately activating her -2 to put a +1/+1 counter on everything you control is exactly what you want, and a great way to ensure synergies for creatures that wouldn't normally have easy ways to get counters on them. Along the same lines is Jiang Yangu, Wildcrafter, turning all of your creatures with counters on them into mana dorks just like Rishkar Pima Renegade does, at the same cost, so why not add him in here for redundancy? He can also downtick to put a +1/+1 counter on a creature, so he's a solid enabler. Then we want to update some of the deck's nuts and bolts. Getting Negate into the list seems like an easy choice, so does Fuel for the Cause. A little pricey for a counterspell at 4 mana, but another source of Proliferate will always do well within the deck. Being a hard counter for anything with no restriction is incredibly solid. Tezzeret's Gambit is also a good card draw spell that proliferates too, being a great way to up your counters and refill your hand for just 3 mana and 2 life. It's solid, and in a lot of cases can mean the difference between a big swing and a game-winning swing. Synergistic mana rocks like Everflowing Chalice should earn a spot too, as Xolatoyac doesn't care what kind of counter is on a permanent to untap it, so a Chalice for just 2 mana and a single counter can be a mana rock reliable enough to generate mana over and over again as it's untapped by your commander. Add in ways to proliferate these counters and it can be making us 3, 4, or 5 mana each turn. Ideally, what we want to do with the deck is get counters on all of our creatures along with a few on other permanents, and either go very aggro with little repercussion as our commander gives us pseudo-vigilance, or stall and win with a Simic Ascendancy as we have all of our creatures explore, get pumped, proliferate, and more. Lastly, for the mana base. As this is a 2-color Commander Precon mana base, there are a lot of non-basics in here just for the sake of being non-basics. There's zero need for Myriad Landscape, Mosswort Bridge, or Temple of the False God in this deck. They feel bad to play early in the game, and later in the game are largely unnecessary. I'd also cut Simic Growth Chamber and Rogue's Passage too, both largely unnecessary with what we already have within the list. And I'd add in Yavimaya Coast, but otherwise, a few more basics and the deck is perfectly serviceable. Lastly, for the upgrade. If I were to spend some extra dollars on the deck, where would I put them to best use? Well, there are a lot of incredible options for this deck, ranging from Inexorable Tide, which is now $15 for some reason, and can help us proliferate all of our counters whenever we cast any kind of spell, through to Doubling Season, which, duh, is just plain good in any deck with a counter strategy. You didn't need me to tell you about this one. But Vorinclex Monstrous Raider could make a great addition to the list too, not only making your counter-generating effects even better, but slowing down any counter generation your opponents might have going on, from Planeswalkers to charge counters. It's a shame he's almost $50 right now. Colonian Hydra would make a cool add to the deck here too, though at about $10, this on-attack counter doubler is a little out of regular Precon upgrade price range. If you do want to include more of these kind of on-attack triggers, a pair of Lightning Greaves in the deck would do all kinds of good too. I also really like the new Court of Garenbrig enchantment from Wilds of Eldraine's commander-only cards. It comes down early and makes a bunch of counters, and introduces the Monarch into the game. With all of your Merfolk being able to sneak through for damage, it's easy to keep getting the Monarch back, and thanks to Xolatoyac untapping our creatures, it's easy to protect the crown and start doubling counters on creatures. Let me know what you think of this upgrade in the comments below, and if you've got any suggestions for additions, be sure to share them with everyone. And be sure to check out my sponsor, Face to Face Games. They're Canada's largest game store and have all of the singles and sealed product you're looking for, including these new Caverns of Ixalan Precons. Use my promo code MECHANIC for 5% off of today's order. And be sure to check out the updated deck list linked in the description at my sponsor Moxfield. Moxfield is the best deck building site in the world, and helps track changes to decks through their easy-to-use deck history feature. While you're there, be sure to follow my profile to never miss a new brew. Don't miss any of these other videos on the channel either. If you were inspired to build today, you have to hit that subscribe button. Sorry, I don't make the rules, it's law. And, of course, as always folks, good luck and have fun.